November 2018, 5 friends, Arjun, Rohan, Kunal, Meera, and Shruti, decided to embark on a trek through the wild terrains of the Western Ghats near Agumbe, Karnataka, a place marked by breathtaking beauty and animal diversity, but also by whispers among locals about the eerie occurrences past certain points in the forest where travelers had disappeared over the years without explanation. These stories were dismissed by the group as pure superstition. The young adventurers felt confident that with proper gear and their collective enthusiasm, they would conquer the forest and return with nothing more than tales of their own. On the first day, the sun was radiant and their spirits high. The sounds of the jungle filled the air, the chirps of birds, the rustling of leaves, and the scattered voices of distant animals. As evening approached, they set up their camp on a plateau that overlooked the dense trees, where the fading light gave the forest a haunting yet peaceful appearance. It was during these tranquil moments that Meera's unease set in, when she noticed an old local man watching them from a distance, standing at the edge of the tree line. He waved them off, muttered something unintelligible under his breath, and turned away hurriedly as though he had seen enough. This brief, unsettling interaction broke Meera's calm, but Arjun and Rohan insisted that there was nothing to worry about, brushing aside the encounter with a nervous laugh. They were too far from civilization to let paranoia creep in. The following day, the group ventured deeper into the woods. They had left the marked trails behind to discover far less traveled paths, convinced that they would have the wilderness to themselves. But what started as curiosity quickly turned into uncertainty. The paths they had been following seemed to disappear before their eyes, and soon the trees grew so dense that sunlight barely filtered through the canopy. As they walked, their GPS signal faded, leaving them relying only on their instincts. The air grew heavier, the silence unnervingly thick, and a sense of being watched began to creep over them. By mid-afternoon, the group had unknowingly strayed so far off course that the familiar sounds of birds and animals had completely disappeared. The quiet was oppressive. They stumbled across a patch of trees marked with unnerving signs, a series of deep gouges high up on the bark. These markings were far above the reach of any animal, even the largest of predators, and Kunal joked nervously, saying, "Maybe a bear's been through here." But Meera, visibly disturbed, pointed out that the markings were far too high for any creature they knew, let alone a bear. She felt the first real pang of fear clamoring in her chest. Despite the growing unease, they pressed on. Kunal, ever the thrill-seeker, convinced the group to continue and remain optimistic. That night, as they set up camp in a more isolated area beneath a large looming tree, the unease thickened. The wind began to howl, but there was something strange about the gusts, this whispering, low, rhythmic sound that seemed to repeat. Initially, it was thought to be the wind, but the voices, a series of names, familiar and distant, sent shivers down their spines. They could not tell whether they were hearing things or if someone or something was out there calling to them. As the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, circling their campsite. At first, they convinced themselves it was just the bizarre acoustics created by the trees, or perhaps animals mimicking sounds. But when a high, piercing scream echoed across the darkness, a scream that was far too shrill and too unnatural to be human, panic erupted. Meera's sharp inhale cut through the night air, followed by a frantic whisper. "Did you hear that? Something's out there." Terrified, They all grabbed for their flashlights and scanned the trees, but nothing seemed to emerge out of the shadows. And then they saw it, standing frozen between two large trees, a tall, dark figure with elongated limbs, its eyes not reflecting the light like an animal's eyes, but rather absorbing it, like pits of pure darkness, stared directly at them. The creature did not walk. It glided. It moved almost as if gravity lost meaning, its form stretching unnaturally as it maneuvered between the trees, eerie in its silent pursuit. Without thinking, the group turned and fled into the heart of the forest, their hearts pounding, dashing through thick underbrush and tangled roots. Through the wild, Kunal's voice broke through. "Don't lose each other." But by the time the cry faded, he was gone. His scream was abruptly cut off, like someone had snuffed out his existence, swallowed by the suffocating air. Mira was the next to vanish. In a state of panic, Arjun and Rohan tried calling out to their friends, but were met only with an unnerving silence. Their flashlight beams darted across the ground, and when Rohan stopped suddenly, he found Kunal's backpack lying in the dirt. It wasn't tossed or dropped in haste. Instead, it was arranged neatly on the ground, as though someone or something had placed it there deliberately. Fear consumed their every thought, urging them to continue running, to keep moving toward what they hoped would be safety. They didn't stop. They ran until their breath became ragged, the branches scraping their skin, and when finally dawn's light broke through the trees, Arjun stumbled at the edge of the forest, bruised, scratched, and mentally shattered, his eyes hollow and his voice barely a whisper. Villagers found him shortly after, mumbling over and over, "It takes what it wants." He couldn't give more than that. No words of what exactly he had seen, just a terrified, silent horror. Rescue teams scoured the forest for days but found nothing. Not a trace of the missing friends. No bodies, no sign of struggle, only those eerie claw marks on the trees. Over time, Arjun was the subject of much speculation. Was it a wild animal attack? A supernatural force? People began to whisper about the curse of the forest, the dark entity said to exist deep in the unmarked parts of the wilderness, something ancient and unforgiving, something that hunted the intruders who dared to disturb its domain. Arjun, unable to shake the terrifying memories, left India soon after, and the forest was once again sealed away, its story continuing to evolve with each passing year. Perhaps the most chilling part of the tale came months after, when a hiker, venturing into the same forest, discovered a cracked phone buried under the dirt. Despite being covered in grime, it powered up, and the last video displayed was taken by Mira and Kunal. Both of them smiled brightly at the camera, but in the background, between the trees, just barely visible, something seemed to watch them. It was waiting, and it always would. Conclusion. The forest holds its secrets well. Those who dare enter may never return, and those who do are never the same. The terrifying events that occurred in the Western Ghats serve as a reminder of the mysteries that nature can hold, unseen, waiting for the next set of adventurers foolish enough to challenge the unknown. Story 2. Whispers in the Taiga, a true encounter from the deep forest. Deep in the heart of the Siberian taiga, an endless expanse of snow-laden pines and frostbitten undergrowth, there exists a forest that few dare to enter. For those who have ventured into its depths, the taiga is not merely a realm of survival against nature's harsh elements, but also a keeper of mysteries older than time itself. In the brutal winter of 2016, Ivan, a seasoned trapper renowned among local communities for his uncanny ability to navigate this unforgiving wilderness, experienced an encounter that would leave him haunted for the rest of his life. Ivan had spent decades mastering the ways of the taiga. He was intimately familiar with every rustle of wind and crunch of snow, every subtle shift in the forest rhythm. Yet nothing in his long career could have prepared him for what transpired on that fateful night when the aurora borealis painted the sky with eerie, shifting colors. Setting out early to check on his trap lines along a seldom-traveled path, Ivan noticed something amiss. The familiar silence was punctuated by a series of inexplicable sounds. At first, he dismissed them as the natural whispers of the wind weaving through the trees. But as he pressed further, a subtle murmur began to rise, a soft, almost imperceptible chorus that seemed to echo his own thoughts, as if the forest were speaking directly to him. Compelled by a mix of trepidation and curiosity, Ivan followed the disembodied voices into a narrow clearing where the fresh snow bore no sign of the usual animal tracks. Instead, he discovered a series of bizarre footprints, human-like yet distorted, vanishing mysteriously into the shadows. They were too irregular to belong to any known wanderer, and Ivan recalled local legends of a guardian spirit said to roam these woods, protecting ancient secrets and punishing those who trespassed. Despite the chill that went beyond the winter cold, he pressed on, driven by an almost irresistible need to uncover the truth behind the strange signs. In the oppressive darkness of the forest, the murmurs swelled into a disconcerting symphony. Then, with a suddenness that froze his blood, a piercing cry shattered the night, a sound that was neither animal nor human, but something altogether otherworldly. Ivan's pulse raced as he caught sight of a fleeting figure emerging from the swirling snow. The apparition, barely visible against the monochrome backdrop, moved with a supernatural grace, gliding as if weightless over the frozen ground. Its eyes, reflecting the ghostly light of the northern skies, burned with an intensity that conveyed both sorrow and warning. For a brief, harrowing moment, Ivan was sure he was in the presence of a spectral guardian of the taiga, an ancient force that defied human understanding. Shaken to his core, Ivan retreated hastily to his modest cabin near a remote outpost. Yet the terror did not end with his return. Over the ensuing days, he found his every waking moment disturbed by inexplicable phenomena. At night, while huddled by the small wood-burning stove, he could hear the soft, insistent whispering of voices beyond his cabin walls, voices that seemed to recite fragments of lost lore in a language older than man. His traps, once reliably laden with game, were mysteriously disturbed and left empty, as if some unseen presence had tampered with his livelihood. Ivan began to document every detail in a worn leather journal, his entries growing increasingly frantic as he struggled to reconcile the rational world he knew with the inexplicable events that now consumed him. Word of Ivan's encounter spread slowly among the local community, and although many were skeptical, a number of fellow trappers and hunters began to share similar, unsettling experiences. Stories of strange footprints, sudden cries in the night, and fleeting apparitions became part of the oral tradition of the region, each account reinforcing the belief that the taiga was alive with a powerful, mysterious force that guarded its secrets fiercely. Despite several expeditions by curious researchers and even local law enforcement, no concrete evidence could ever explain the phenomena Ivan described. The footprints would vanish as mysteriously as they had appeared, and the ghostly figure remained an enigma, a spectral reminder that some boundaries in nature are best left unchallenged. Even as the seasons turned and the forest slowly reclaimed its quiet order, Ivan's tale lingered in the hearts and minds of those who had heard it. His once steady demeanor was forever marred by the lingering presence of that night, a constant reminder that the wilderness holds mysteries far beyond human comprehension. His journal, preserved by family members and shared with curious locals, stands as a chilling testament to the inexplicable power and relentless spirit of the Taiga. Today, the story of Ivan's encounter continues to be recounted around flickering fires in remote villages, a cautionary tale urging all who enter the deep forest to tread with reverence and heed the silent, unyielding warnings carried on the wind. In the vast, uncharted expanses of the Siberian taiga, where every shadow may conceal a secret and every whisper might be a call from the past, one truth endures: the forest is not a place for the faint of heart. Its depths harbor echoes of ancient lore, and for those brave enough to listen, the voices of the wilderness may offer wisdom or doom. The Hollow Grove. Deep within the heart of the wilderness, beyond any marked trails or satellite maps, lay a stretch of forest known as Hollow Grove. The name had persisted for centuries, passed down by locals who spoke of it in hushed tones. Some called it cursed. Others believed it was alive, a place where men entered but did not return. Dr. Elias Carter was not a man of superstition. An anthropologist renowned for his studies on lost civilizations, he had spent his career unraveling myths and exposing folklore for what it truly was: exaggerations of reality. So, when he heard the whispers of Hollow Grove, he saw not danger, but opportunity. There were stories of ancient symbols, strange disappearances, and a temple that predated any known civilization. The forest, he believed, was hiding history waiting to be uncovered. Against the warnings of the villagers, Elias and his small team of researchers set out into the woods, their packs loaded with cameras, tracking devices, and archaeological tools. The first day was uneventful. The trees, ancient and towering, seemed to absorb sound, muting the world around them. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves, just an eerie silence that felt too heavy. By nightfall, they made camp, brushing off their unease. It wasn't until Lena, one of the researchers, noticed something that their laughter faded. The trees bore carvings, symbols, intricate and unsettling, wound their way around the bark, some appearing to have been etched centuries ago, others seemingly fresh. When examined from different angles, the symbol shifted as though alive. The team assumed it was the work of an ancient tribe, a groundbreaking discovery. But the more they stared, the more a strange feeling crept over them, as if they were being watched. That night, as they gathered around the fire, a sound drifted through the trees, a whisper, not the wind, not an animal, a voice, low, guttural, speaking in a language none of them understood. The fire flickered violently, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. Then, silence, an unnatural, suffocating silence. By morning, one of their own was gone. His tent was untouched, his belongings still in place. There were no footprints leading away, no sign of struggle. The only clue was his camera, lying near the edge of camp, its lens pointed toward a dark opening in the ground. Elias hesitated before pressing play. The screen flickered, revealing their missing teammate standing at the edge of the hole, staring at something unseen. His breathing was ragged, his body trembling. Then, in a hoarse whisper, he spoke. "It's looking at me." The screen distorted into static. The team debated leaving, but the rational part of their minds fought against their growing fear. They were scientists. They needed answers. So, they followed the tunnel. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became. The walls were covered in markings, but these were different from those on the trees. These looked clawed in, as if something had scratched them in a desperate frenzy. At times, Elias could have sworn he saw shadows shifting within the stone, moving when they shouldn't have. Then they entered the cavern. It was vast, the ceiling lost to darkness. Bones littered the ground, remnants of something that had happened long ago. But in the center of the chamber, upon a stone throne, sat a figure. It was humanoid, but wrong. Its withered skin clung to its bones, its hollow eye sockets locked onto them despite being empty. It did not move. It did not need to. A realization struck Elias, cold and absolute. They were not explorers here. They were participants. A deep, rhythmic sound pulsed through the cavern, not quite a voice, not quite a chant. The others, Lena included, fell to their knees, their hands moving on their own, tracing symbols into the dirt as if finishing an ancient ritual. Elias fought against it, but his body betrayed him. His fingers worked against his will, dragging deep lines into the soil. He wanted to stop. He wanted to run. Then the figure smiled. A rush of darkness exploded outward, snuffing out their lights. The world twisted. When Elias awoke, he was alone. The cavern was gone. The tunnels, gone. Only the forest remained, stretching endlessly in all directions. The sky above was wrong, the stars unfamiliar, shifting in slow, methodical spirals. He screamed for his team, but only the wind answered. He ran, stumbling through the undergrowth, desperate to find his way back. But the deeper he went, the more the trees changed. The carvings were different now. New ones had appeared. They weren't just symbols anymore. They were faces, and among them, his own. Terror choked him as he realized what they had done. The ritual wasn't to summon something. It was to replace something. He wasn't the first, and he wouldn't be the last. Months later, a search party entered Hollow Grove, led by desperate families clinging to hope. But no trace of Elias or his team was found. No signs of struggle, no remains, only their abandoned campsite, left untouched. Yet something was different. The trees bore new carvings, symbols the villagers had never seen before. They pulsed with a strange energy, almost whispering as the wind passed through them. And among the carvings, a name had been added: Elias Carter. His face, etched in unnatural precision, stared blankly from the bark, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. The villagers never searched Hollow Grove again. Some say the forest swallowed them whole. Others believe they're still in there, trapped between time, whispering from the trees, calling for someone to take their place. But those who listen too closely never return. Did this story send chills down your spine? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying tales. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our next horror story.